and Northern Quest Casino and Resort and the Hamilton Studios, without whom this event and so much of our organization's work would not be possible. I'm going to ask all of you to stay with us through the last minutes of this event for an exciting surprise opportunity that has been provided to us by one of our mission partners. I'm going to take a moment to thank our panelists, Kim, Stacy, and Sherri, and all of you participants out there that are taking time to be part of this important conversation. Before we get started, one more thing that I'd like to add is it's important to take a moment to acknowledge that this Shecession has disproportionately affected women of color. We are conspicuously missing voices of the BIPOC community on our panel today. We encourage all voices to please chime in with your experiences in the chat feature. We're committed to ensuring that these discussions are more fully represented in future roundtables. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly. Just give me an idea of what your work is and what your passions are. So we'll go Kim, Stacy, and then Sherri. And so Kim, I'm going to let you start.
I'm Kim Choat. I'm director of the Women's Opportunity Center here at the YWCA. And we do a lot in the Women's Opportunity Center, employment being one of the things that we focus upon and help women with. We have, our Sister's Closet, which many people know about. We do parenting classes. We do so much. We do life skills classes for women on TANF. And so I'm excited to be here. I've been with the YWCA for 10 years. And prior to that, I was in corporate America in customer service and training director and all those sorts of things. I have a passion for helping people heal trauma and creating environments where that can happen.
Awesome, Kim. Known Kim for a while now. Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy Wenzl. I have so many hats on, it's hard to know which hat am I wearing in this session. So I think first and foremost, I'm a woman and a mom and a community member from Spokane for a long time. And so just super excited to be joining you all in community and conversation today. I guess the hat that I wear for this purpose is I'm also a small business owner. I've worked with a number of the nonprofits I see popping up in our participant window for all things performance and quality improvement. I also work full-time, although I'm not officially representing their interests here in this call, I have to say that, but I work full-time for the state of Washington, Department of Children, Youth, and Family Services. So I do that, and then my history, my background is in data, so I still get to work with many of you all in the room because I have a data lens and I'm a data geek and advocate, so I like to lean into that and support y'all when I can in that endeavor as well. So lots of different hats. Super happy to be here today. Kick it over to Sherri.
Well, thank you, Stacy. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sherri Lynch, and I'm representing Gonzaga University and specifically the School of Leadership Studies. My role at the School of Leadership Studies is that I run our Women's Leadership Program. And what that means is we really, we have a mission to educate and empower women so that they can be better both personally and professionally. And I don't do this work because I don't like men and I just want to elevate women. I do it because I think that all genders should be elevated equally, and women struggle in certain areas, and there are certain systemic barriers that don't allow that to always happen. And so that really is the core of my work. I also am a mom in the community, and that's probably my most favorite role. I have worked for nonprofits in Spokane, and I actually was a woman-owned business for a while as well. So I'm really happy to be with you today. I'm a current doctoral student just finishing up my dissertation, and it is around women's leadership. So like Stacy, I'm a bit of a data geek, so I'm going to try not to throw too many statistics at you, but I do think that the statistics that I do share tell a really great story, and they also help to offer us some solutions. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you for being a part of this conversation. So this discussion is going to be in three key parts. First, we're going to define the problem, and we're going to move to outlining hopefully some solutions and some calls to action, if you will. And then we're going to be answering some questions that maybe our participants will place for us. Over the course of this conversation, as questions come up, you can go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen and put a question in the question and answer queue down there at the bottom of the screen. To the extent that we have time, we're going to review those and answer some of those questions at the end of our presentation. You can also use the chat feature if you want. We will be monitoring that. Please feel free to chat back and forth to one another, other participants perhaps that you're seeing that are on this roundtable discussion. I'm not going to be monitoring the chat. That's going to be a little bit too much for me to manage and moderate at the same time, but we do have other people who'll be looking at that. So thank you, all of you that are in the background, Andrew and Brianna. I'm appreciating your help right now, so thank you. Okay, so we've been using this term Shecession, a female recession, if you will. And I'd love to see, there's been a lot of media headlines out there about women's job losses during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'd like to give each one of the panelists just a chance to dive a little deeper into this and help us understand what kind of problem we're looking at and what we really mean by the Shecession. Can one of you give me kind of what the definition of this is and what you see that's happening?
I'm happy to go first. So basically the Shecession, which is a really hard word to say, by the way, I really struggle with that word because just the phonetics of it don't work for me. So I'm sorry if I sound like I have a lisp when I say it, but so in good times, women do tend to have lower paying jobs than men. And that's due to a variety of factors, everything from unconscious bias, inherent sexism in the workplace, systemic systems of racism and sexism. So there are certain industries that women and people of color tend to aggregate towards. Unfortunately, those industries were decimated during the pandemic. So in Spokane specifically, we're talking about retail, the service industry, hospitality and tourism. These are industries that really do drive the economic workforce in Spokane, and they were not able to function during pandemic times. Because they tend to be, the majority of those workers tend to be women, we have a predominant number of women who are now not working. That's not just specific to Spokane, but it's all across the nation. And actually it's across the globe. During the pandemic, women were almost 2 times more likely to lose their job because of COVID and pandemic related issues than men were. So it's something we're not just seeing in our own community, but we're seeing it globally. And it really comes down to simple economics. So if you have a couple, if someone has to stay home to be with the children, it makes the most sense to have the person stay home who doesn't make as much money. More often than not, that person tends to be the woman in the relationship, or whoever's making less money. So if the children aren't able to go to childcare because those childcare facilities aren't open, or they're not able to go to school because school has been canceled, then someone must stay home with the kids. So what that has done is it has not only completely dismantled all of our, many of our industries where women congregate, but it has also dismantled the childcare system. And so what that has done across the nation is that our maternal workforce population has fallen down to levels that it was at in 1988. And that is going to take a tremendous amount of time for us to recover from that. That's what's being deemed the Shecession, because it has, it's affected women more than it has men.
Thank you, Sherri. I can see from the poll that we asked the question, have you or a woman you know been affected by job loss or forced to reduce hours or pay due to COVID-19? And we have 69% of our participants saying yes. So that's significant. One of the things that I read in the media recently was that during the month of December, and I believe it was a Department of Labor statistic that said all of the job losses experienced in the month of December were women. So when they were comparing those statistics, there were actually job gains for men, and the losses were due to loss from women in the workforce. Stacy?
Yeah, so I'm not surprised about that. I think the little bit of statistic I kind of weave in here kind of touches on Sherri when she introduced herself. Her first role is mom, right? That's one of my first roles. Not always my favorite role. It kind of depends on my day and how my kids are behaving, right? But childcare. So, I think back to when I've been in the workforce for as long as I can remember, like 16, right? And I had children and went right back to the workforce. But I remember how stressful it is as a working mom to try to place your children in daycare setting where you feel like they're safe, they're thriving, they're loved. That was stressful in the best of times outside of a COVID pandemic, right? So I think one of the biggest problems that we're seeing that contributes to the, see if I can say it, Shecession, is loss of childcare spots, right? And so there's some pretty interesting facts. Childcare Aware is one resource that I'd always recommend people take a look at. And there's also resources on the Department of Children and Family Services website, but that talks about how many of our childcare providers have shut down through COVID. Well, that directly impacts, right, those families whose children were in care. And so statistics last year, the reports are that up to 24% of licensed childcare providers were closed. And it's anticipated that about 14% of those are probably going to be closed permanently. So there was a childcare kind of a crisis of lack of sufficient quality, affordable childcare, especially for lower income families prior to the pandemic. And then you've had a whole slew of childcare providers close. And so what are you supposed to do with that as a working mom? I wish I could see everybody's face. I'd ask, show of hands, did anybody have to or is still working from home while parenting? That is really, really stressful. And so I definitely have experienced that myself. And so that's just kind of compounding, and sanity has got to factor in there, and well-being of the family and mental health of the family. So all that kind of contributes to what we're experiencing as part of the Shecession, and will impact whether or not those women come back into the workforce. Yeah. So it's a complicated problem.
And that's a big number, 14%. I mean, I know here in the workforce here at the YWCA, we've had a number of people that have had to be out of work or working from home because their daycare was closed during this particular pandemic. So it's created a number of different hardships for employers of all sizes, and continues. 14% not reopening is kind of takes my breath away. It really does. Kim, can you speak to a little bit about what you're seeing and experiencing in the Women's Opportunity Center here at the YWCA? What are you hearing from clients? What can you share with us?
I think it's important to maybe frame a little bit of the population that we're working with, right? So we're working with a woman who has a lot of barriers, who often is in the throes of trauma, and doesn't have the support systems that many other people do. So we're seeing women really, huddle in and do what they need to do to keep themselves safe and their children safe. And what happens if a mom who is a single parent gets COVID, right? It's just the repercussions of that are huge, particularly if she's in an intimate partner domestic violence relationship, and potentially her children, if she's sick, could go back to her partner. There's just so many ramifications. So we saw fewer women stepping up to want to get work. They were terrified, and really being incredibly resilient with the systems that they have to just ride out the storm, right? But we're now getting to the point that we're ready to reopen and have people kind of step back in, and hopefully there'll be positions that are available and we can help women in that way. I also will say, we work with women on TANF For those of you that don't know what TANF is, it's temporary assistance for needy families. And that's when you're getting some money as well as food stamps, and you must have children in order to qualify for that. And so many of those women were just so relieved to have time to be with their kids. These systems require you to do so much. You have so many mandated requirements that their children are in childcare and they're on the bus and they're going everywhere. And this really allowed them to be with their children. Some of them, I think, are done with that full time, and and everybody is definitely missing community. I feel like community is the main thing that these women need, a positive community, and that's not happening. So that's another miss.
Thank you, Kim. That missing community, we all know how that feels. That's probably been one of the things that we've talked about as an agency the most, is that missing community. I've got one more question as we're talking about kind of the problem, and then we'll start discussing some of the solutions. But why can we not expect all of these jobs just to come back after the pandemic is over?
And wouldn't it be great if they did?
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to think that our community and our globally that women will just get those jobs back. But unfortunately, Stacy alluded to it, a lot of those businesses will not reopen. They haven't been able to sustain themselves financially during the pandemic because, whether it's a restaurant or it's a childcare center or it's a travel and tourism agency, they cannot sustain themselves without having an income. And they have probably pivoted and they're now doing something else. I read an interesting statistic yesterday that a lot of people who used to be in the service industry, whether they were a waiter or a waitress, they're now either driving for Uber or they are working at a call center scheduling vaccines, which I thought was so interesting. But so many of them have gone to that. And so they don't plan to go back into the service industry, but they needed something more stable to bring in income for their family. And if our labor participation rate for women has fallen to levels that it was in 1988, it's going to take us years. In a normal recession, it takes about 8 years for that bell curve to level out. But when you're talking about a recession caused by a pandemic, they're talking about a minimum of 10 years before we rebound to where we were before the pandemic began. So it's going to take some time, unfortunately, and it's going to take a lot of flexibility. And I'm excited to talk about the solutions because I do think that there are things that our workplaces and our organizations can do to make that trend hopefully not continue out as long as it's planned to continue. But we'll get to that next.
Yes. So any other comments before we start talking about solutions? Okay. Well,
I am going to say, I do think that what we witnessed is the huge impact on single parents, right? So that's a very specific group that really struggled through this because of the lack of, obviously we can all understand why, but the lack of support.
Yeah. Thank you.
The other thing that I might add too, that I think is sort of a blessing in disguise, and I'm a silver lining kind of person. I always want to see, what can we benefit from this? But there's this invisible thing called the second shift. And for women, what that is they go to work 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever that shift is, and they get paid for a job. Then they go home and they have to stop at the grocery store on the way home. Then they have to pick up kids at soccer practice. Then they have to help kids with homework. Then they make dinner. There's all these other things that happen outside of their normal 8 to 5 job. That's known as the second shift. It's unpaid work. I'm not saying, and I'm by no means am I advocating that men don't do that. However, more often than not, women tend to have more hours in that second shift. What we have seen from the pandemic is that there's also a third shift, and that is homeschooling kids or providing childcare for your kids. And there's a fourth shift, which is, oh my goodness, my elderly parents are sick. I have to now do their shopping. I have to now care for them. So not only do we have all of these shifts happening, but it's impossible to make it transparent because we're working from home and everyone is in maybe our bedroom with us while we're trying to corral the kids in the other room. So I think the silver lining of that is that this was something that women have been dealing with for a really long time with that second shift. Now it's exposed, it's out in the open, and we're all aware that there's a lot happening behind the scenes, and there's so much more transparency, and there's a humanness to us that we can't hide from. And I think that's actually a really beautiful thing that gives employers and organizations an opportunity to be better.
Thank you, Sherri. That is exactly right on point. I think we can all identify, a number of us on this call can identify with those times when we've had to play and participate in all 4 of those shifts. So thank you. So let's continue to talk a little bit more about some of the solutions. We want to make sure that we have the opportunity to address some of the questions and answers. So if you have any of those, be sure and send those in. I'm looking at my screen over here to see if we have any that I need to address now, but I don't see any. So I'm going to pretend that's not there anymore. And we're going to move towards talking about solutions. Okay, so we talked about accessing childcare. So Sherri, you started with some solutions that you have at the top of your mind. Tell us what you see.
I've actually got some really cool stuff. But the number one thing that I think that is giving us an opportunity to practice empathy. We get to see into each other's homes and each other's lives. And I can't even tell you how many times over the last year, I'm sure we've all experienced it, where a child wanders by or somebody's dog starts walking and then the conversation diverts away from the business that you're doing. It's like, oh, what kind of dog do you have? Or, how old is your dog? Or, what is your daughter? What is she working on? And it allows us an opportunity to really be human with each other. And I think that's wonderful. So I think that's probably the number one thing that it's giving us an opportunity to do. Number two, I think it's really important that that organizations understand that they are given an opportunity to be flexible and to do something different. So oftentimes it's really easy for those of us who don't necessarily love change to say, oh, well, we've always done it this way. Mm-hmm. However, we can now look at it and say, is that way working for us? Do we need to do something different? And Stacy alluded to it earlier when she was talking about the childcare problem. And it's always sort of been, childcare is up to the employee, and it's not necessarily an employer problem. I think it is. I'm here to argue that childcare is ingrained with who our employees are, and it should become an employer problem. And it's giving us an opportunity to allow our employers to be better and to do better. So I would say those are the top two, but I have some more. I want to pass it over to Stacy or Kim though before I come back to them.
Jump in, Stacy.
Yeah, I would like to add, I think kind of philosophically, I think this is an opportunity for workplaces to really look at how they're centering human-centered practice and culture in their organization. So if you think about what has life been like, corporate life, business life, being a working professional, think about your own schedule or the women or professionals that are working around the clock because they're stretched thin. And it's like the norm. If you want to get ahead, you got to work yourself to the bone. That's not good for human beings, and it's not good for humanity and our practices together. So I think culturally, this is an opportunity for organizations to really be thinking about what have we learned through this and what's our intentional strategy for supporting our workforce moving forward in a humane fashion. So that's generally. I think some very tangible things that employers can do for one another are things like look at your flexible work policies. So increasing the flexible work policies. Does somebody really need to be in front of their Zoom 8 to 5 for solid 8 hours? No, it's not healthy, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally. So can you extend the working hours so people can accommodate the kids popping into the background? So that's just a very tangible thing. I think it's an opportunity to look at policies for new parents. Do you have workplace policies that support breastfeeding mothers or fathers bringing in their children in the workforce, so you have that bonding between parent and child? So just kind of a renewed focus on that. Another thing that's easy to do is social support groups. So one of the things that I really love about working for Department of Children, Youth, and Family Services is standing up just social connect groups to combat the isolation that the workforce is experiencing. So just a couple of weeks ago, we had one specifically focused on parenting professionals. And it was just, hey, we're in this together. And the response to it was overwhelming, like the number of moms and parents saying, oh my gosh, I just needed to know I wasn't alone, like I'm experiencing this. So those are some very tangible things that people can contemplate in order to support women in the workplace. And I could go on, but I'll pause because I know Kim has some great thoughts.
Well, I think those are fantastic thoughts. And I'm hopeful that this is a movement as too, right? We're in the age of movements. And how do we support parents, not only when they're little, which I think is fantastic, but we have so many moms because they're in those entry level positions. One kid gets sick, then the next kid gets sick, that, it goes through the household and they don't have a job anymore. And there is no sick child care available, in the community. Vanessa Beeham to some degree, and I'm not positive about how much they do with the sick, but, there's not general availability for that. And also child care, like you said, Stacy, stretching those hours. But for our moms, even when they're back into the workforce, stretching the hours of, what that can look like for a mom. Maybe she wants to work at a restaurant at night, no childcare, all of those things. So stretching those hours to be more accommodating, not to mention transportation. But I think employers understanding that, it's less about punching that clock every single time and more about helping the human. And I get that that's challenging in an environment when you don't have people show up, but we just need to learn to be a lot more flexible and trust in our employees to be doing the best job they can. But, taking care of kids is a full-time gig and things happen all the time. Yeah. So I think those are a couple of the things that came to mind.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Those are all great comments. One of the things that when I was looking at some of the questions that I've just seen here for the panelists, we were talking about what kind of economic empowerment programs and opportunities have been elsewhere in the United States or in other countries that perhaps we can see established here in the Spokane region. And what needs to really take place so that we can have these innovative programs? Anything that you've heard about out there that you think that we could utilize here?
We've started doing a program that's called Mobility Mentoring, and Mobility Mentoring is out of an organization in Boston called Empath, and it's a trajectory of 5 years from poverty to middle class. Now, even they'll say that's very difficult to do, right? It's very difficult to move from poverty into middle class. It takes time for most people. So I think having more of an understanding that this is not an immediate fix for a lot of individuals. Some individuals can go out and get a job in, normal circumstances in a heartbeat, and that's fine. But for a lot of the parents that we're working with, between, their safety concerns and being housed potentially during all of this with their perpetrator, and all of the myriad of barriers that they have, it's a time-consuming process. And I also think we need, a national movement that puts parents at the front of the forefront. And what that looks like, I don't know, but I see Stacy shaking her head, so maybe she has some ideas.
I don't have concrete ideas. I'm just like, yes, it's been needed for a long, long time.
Yeah. So before we go to some of the questions that have been coming in from the participants, Sherri, Stacy, Kim, anybody else want to share anything? I think we've got some great questions coming in.
Well, I did want to say that I just want to point out that I think Spokane's workforce development is really impressive. If somebody wants to get a job, there are so many organizations that are working on this, from WorkSource to Career Path Services to community colleges, and then, CBOs. And so it's helping people connect to some of those programs sometimes, because it's, right now at Workforce Development, they're having a re-enter the workforce, or re-engage, program that's going to get you reskilled potentially. We've got partners like Transitions that have New Leaf Bakery and, barista shop downstairs. Goodwill does amazing technical training, as well as employment training, so there are resources in Spokane to help people get back into the workforce. I think that people just don't necessarily, know about them. I don't, or want to utilize them as much as they're available. But I am impressed with what Spokane has to offer, and we all work together closely.
Thank
There's
you.
some really cool trends happening across the nation. And there are some large employers that are being really, really innovative. So companies like Cisco and Allstate and Accenture, they're doing things where they normally have a childcare center on premises. They might have several thousand employees, and so they've opened a childcare center. With their employees working from home, they no longer need those childcare centers. So they are now converting them to learning centers where parents can come and they can bring their children and they can allow them to do their schooling. If schools are closed, they can do it there. And parents can either go home and work from home, or they can stay in the building and work. So they're being innovative and they're coming up with other ideas because they do continue to see it as an employer problem, not simply just an employee problem. There's also companies that are partnering with various summer camp organizations, which I think is super cool, and allowing folks the opportunity to say, hey, I have no childcare options right now, but I know this summer I'm going to have probably 4 hours a day to get some work done because my employer is partnering with this summer camp program, and my kids will be occupied for a few hours. So it's giving employees some hope too. And I think it's a chance for employers and organizations to get really creative and innovative and come up with some of those things. The other one that I heard about that I thought was so cool, it's a returnship program. And so it's basically a 4-month program that invites mainly women and people of color to come back into an organization and sort of have like a reskills and rebuilding training period for 4 months. And then at the end, they're offered full-time employment. So it's sort of like a part-time progression back into the workforce, which for me, I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. And I sort of created my own back to work program by working part-time, and then I merged into full-time. But had there been a returnship program option, so I could really build my confidence after being gone for 10 years and rebuild my skills, I think that would have been something I would have loved to participate in. So I think there's really a great opportunity right now for companies to be intentional about what it is that they want for their workforce and to really build that into their strategic initiatives.
That's a great comment. Thank you, Sherri. I appreciate that. So anything else before we go to some of the participant questions?
I would just add to be on the lookout. I don't have the details because it's unfolding, but I do know, because I think there's been a comment like Biden administration and what's been happening for the childcare issue specifically. I know that there's funding coming down the pike that's being planned, and I think there's going to be a lot more information being released out of the state in the next month or so. So relief is definitely coming through some federal and other funding streams.
Thank you,
Being
Stacy.
on the
That's
lookout
great
for that.
news. That's great news. So Brianna's asking us, what is it as individuals that we can do to be supportive of our fellow women as so we can help them recover through this process? How can we as individuals assist?
I think the number one thing we can do is provide empathy, seeing our colleagues as human and understanding that there are extraordinary circumstances that we're dealing with right now. And if there's a way that we can be supportive to our colleagues, even something simple like, hey, I know you have this meeting on your calendar at 2. How about you let me go to that meeting? I'll take notes and you and I can do a quick catch up at 3 o'clock. That'll give you a half an hour to get some stuff done. You know, providing little things like that, I think means so much to people in what we're all going through right now. So for me, I'm now an empty nester and I don't have small children at home. My younger sister has a 1st grader and a 3rd grader. And then she's in hell right now because she just has, you know, she's got these 2 kids at home and she's working full time and she's doing all the things. So any amount of support that I can provide her and be empathetic toward her and provide her resources, I think the world is calling on us all to be a little more kind.
Yeah. I'd add some, go ahead, Kim, you go.
So sorry, I just said ditto. I was like, I agree. The first thing I thought of, we need to listen to one another and really hold space and care, you know, and it can be as simple as, you know, making somebody a pie. I don't know, but, you know, just really connecting is what I think what we need. Go ahead, Stacy, sorry.
Well, no, it sounds so simple, you know, but we do gatherings a lot just on the simple act of, how do you build your own internal resilience, which is, self-care. Women are like the first to like let go of their own self-care as they manage, what is it, Sherri? The first, second, third, fourth shifts, right? But you've heard it say like, what do they recommend when you're flying? You got to put on your own mask in a crisis before you can help somebody else. So self-care, stepping away from the computer, getting some exercise, taking turns taking the kids to school. So I know I have a friend on the call and our kids go to school together. So Nikki, like, you pick up the kids today, I'll do it tomorrow. So like know your neighbor and make those connections. I also think in smaller units, you can establish some team boundaries, like no back-to-back meetings. Like we're going to schedule 50-minute meetings or whatever. So you give yourself some of that break to get away from the Zoom and the computer for those that have that kind of a job. So some of the things we already know to do that we just don't prioritize, I think now's the time. And I would encourage all women leaders, if you're in a leadership role or management position, walk the talk, right? Set those boundaries for yourself and model that behavior. Because, if your staff are seeing you work around the clock and wear yourself to the bone, they're going to follow suit. But if they see you taking care of yourself, then they're going to feel permission to do the same.
And strangely, I think that we are all sitting around waiting for someone to give us permission. So I just heard Stacy give us all permission. So I'm thinking we should listen.
I agree. Take that moment, take that walk, call that friend. Yep. Thank you.
I have to say, I do want to say, Jeanette's done an amazing job of providing an environment where we feel safe, and she's teaching us to pause, which you do need permission and you need someone that models it, and I'm working on it.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. And as you're saying pause, I'm sitting here trying to pause and not rush to the next part as I'm trying to, I've never been a moderator of a panel before, so I'm trying to watch the time and look at the questions and see where I go next. So for all of you that are out there watching this, thank you for your patience and your grace as I navigate through this for the first time. We do have a couple of really good questions that I'd like to get to before we move on. Karen asks, is there any data or information you can share regarding women creating their own revenue streams through small business and home businesses? I think we started talking about that. I think Sherri, you brought that up.
Yeah, and the majority of, I wish I had the exact statistic in front of me. I think it's like 52 or 53% of new businesses that are started by women. So more predominantly, small businesses are women owned versus male owned. I don't know what those stats are during COVID. And whoever is starting a business during COVID, hallelujah, my hat is off to you, because these are hard times. And I know there are businesses starting. I've heard of a couple of them in Spokane, and it blows me away that in spite of everything happening, they still took the opportunity to get out there and go after it. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah. So
Jeanette, I'd also encourage the people that are participating on this, like, share your wealth and your wisdom. Like, what do you know? Like, let's use the chat window and distribute resources and knowledge. So just encouraging some participation, their participants.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I do hope that you all are using the chat out there, sending in questions and answers. We're not going to be able to get to all the questions. And some of the questions we don't have the answers to. We're not going to be able to get to all of that, but to the extent that you have those ideas, questions, please put those in the chat or in the question and answer, and so that we can have an opportunity to continue to think about opportunities and ways to share information with all of you. We have one more question that I think is very interesting. And Jamie's asking us, are there ways to help on a micro level that we can share today? So examples, is there a good way to help by spending in the community? Are there opportunities to donate time that would help some of these organizations, and then by way of helping some of the women who have been displaced? And I really like she was saying that she really liked the idea of returnship that Sherri had shared. And maybe there's more help around that particular topic.
Yeah, I don't know of any specific organizations where you could donate time, but I can I mean, this makes me think of like overall, I think one thing that you could do is mentor somebody. And I don't know where you would find somebody. I mean, I'm sure that the YWCA could probably connect you, but I think that that's one area where when women have someone and they have a community and a support system around them, they tend to do better. And not just professionally, but personally too. And we all need mentors. If you could even take it one step further, I would say sponsorship is even better. So if you see a woman in your organization, or any person in your organization for that matter, who you see potential in, talk about that person when they're not in the room. Advocate for them, help them along without them really actually knowing that you're doing it. And I think we all have the opportunity to do that, because that's how we really pull out those people who, you know, we know are the shining stars. And I think we all have an opportunity to really help people be the best self that they can be.
Yeah.
So I'd also plug Jeanette. I know you're not asking me to do this, but like give to our local agencies that are supporting women's and children's issues. So the Y being one of them, right? I'd also point you all to the Women Helping Women Fund that provides funding for a lot of different women and children serving organizations. And they have some really great new collective giving strategies where people can pool their money. So maybe you don't have a lot to contribute at this point, but you can contribute 20 bucks a month. That's pooled for bigger giving. So don't forget to sustain, you know, these organizations that are supporting some of our most vulnerable in the community.
And I would say for us to stay attuned to where we're at in the process, you know, like Sherri said, mentorship is definitely something that we would be interested in, and we look at, we have, like I said, the mobility mentoring program, but we're just not quite poised to like launch something large right now. And our women aren't quite back, you know, they're coming back slowly, but they're not here. But stay attuned, and we may have something that's really would be beneficial to our participants that you could participate in. So our Sisters Closet will be looking for volunteers for that very soon. So.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. In Jamie's comment, she was talking about, you know, how can we spend our dollars in the community? You know, those locally owned businesses, you know who those people are, you know, those women-owned businesses. You know, I can call out a number just off the top of my head. Lucky Vintage, Chaps, all this. I can think of the various hairstylists that you support, some of the smaller boutique stores, you know, any of those that are locally owned, and also those that are employing women in large numbers. Kim mentioned Goodwill, the UGM thrift store. All of those organizations are really supporting and can help make an impact at that micro level that Jamie's asking about.
And I'd love to also give a little plug for Rick Clark. He's running the Spokane Quarantine. And if you haven't heard of it, it is an amazing organization that he put together. He is a Gonzaga grad, I gotta tell you that. He is fantastic, and he really is promoting the power of collective giving. And people are not giving very much, but he has donated over, as part of his organization, like over $300,000 since last October, I think it was. And he's supported over 170 businesses, not just restaurants, but different businesses. It is so cool to be a part of his Facebook page, because every time he posts, it's something where he's blessing somebody. And it's such a refreshing trend to see that on my Facebook feed versus all of the negativity from COVID and the pandemic. So I wanted to give him a little shout out too.
Yeah, the Quarantine, you can certainly follow them on Facebook. They've got a, you know, a great following, and they're doing some really amazing work. So thank you, Sherri. That's a great addition. So I'm kind of swiveling my head here and starting to watch my time. So I don't have any other questions coming in. I just want to give the three panelists an opportunity. If there's anything else to add that you didn't get a chance to, you know, please add that now. Any closing thoughts?
I think my closing thought is, you know, which I forgot to say this in my opening, like women are amazing. I'm not saying men aren't cool too, and or people that don't, you know, gender associate as a woman. So we're all amazing human beings. I think take a moment to appreciate and have gratitude for how you've been able to get through this last year. Regardless of your circumstances, you've probably learned something about yourself and gained a powerful experience. And part of that resilience in those small moments are just taking a moment to appreciate your own resilience and how you've come through this and what you've learned and how you've supported your family and your community. Those are really powerful moments to build on. So I think all of us need to search for those strengths that we've gained over the last year.
Mhm.
So, but we are women. Hear us roar. So.
I
Sherri?
just want to say thank you, Jeanette, for allowing us the opportunity to not only talk about the problem, but talk about solutions too, because I do think it can be pretty overwhelming to just hear constant bad news and how long it's going to be to fix everything that's been broken in the last year. But I like the format of being able to talk about solutions as well, and it gives me hope. So thank you.
Thank you.
I agree, and I do hope that we can stay focused as a community on how do we take care of some of these issues that were present prior to the pandemic but came to light, and and were magnified and much worse during the pandemic. So I see women working really hard, and I want to say about our women that they're, oh, feathers. I tear up about our women.
Mm-hmm.
They're resilient and strong and beautiful. So
And beautiful.
thank you for doing this, Jeanette, and all of the development team.
Thank you, Kim. You know, I share your passion and so appreciate you being open with it. So I am going to start wrapping up now because I do kind of have a little special announcement. But before I do that, I always have to reach out and thank every single one of the staff members of the YWCA Spokane. Every one of you, and I know a lot of you are listening today. Thank you. I hope you know how grateful I am. And we are grateful for one another, the community that we have created during the past year, I think has strengthened us. And thank you to every single one of not only our mission partners, but all of our donors. When you give to the YWCA, you give us the opportunity with an unrestricted gift to help where need is greatest. And we so appreciate that. So thank you. Again, staff, you're awesome. I'm overwhelmed every day of how you stand and your strength and all the support that you've given me in my new role here as a CEO. So thank you. So I'm going to keep rolling as I notice that my time is starting to wane. First thing that I want to let everyone know that we are going to be facilitating another really important conversation on April 22nd, which is our Stand Against Racism event. If you will navigate over to our website at ywcaspokane.org, you can register for that event and find more information. Again, it will be a virtual event still this year, but we have a great agenda. Our topic will be addressing racism as a public health crisis. So please plan on joining us for that event. I think it'll be great. And if there's any more information that you want, you can see Erica has just dropped in the chat the link for that event. So click away and register for that. So I spoke just a little bit ago about that unrestricted giving. I'd like to announce a new opportunity for everyone. We're starting to kick off our spring giving time and celebrating Mother's Day. And this is going to be in the spirit of honoring and empowering women, mothers, and caregivers of all kind. Every individual who donates between now and Mother's Day will be entered in an opportunity to win a spa and stay package at the Kalispell Tribe at the Northern Quest Casino and Resort. So thank you very much to our mission partner for sponsoring that. So we're going to give everyone an opportunity to participate in that donates between now and Mother's Day. You can, again, navigate over to our website, and there'll be a place there where you can, thank you, Erica, she just put that in the chat. You can navigate there and you can donate. And, you know, what a better way to honor someone that you really care about, your mother or another special person in your life that's been really supportive. And that will also help our programs here at the YWCA Spokane as we work to eliminate racism and to empower women. I just want to encourage each one of you, when you're making those donations, there'll be a little place where you can put a comment. If you want to honor someone who's been important in your life, you can write those comments or tell a story. We'll be sharing some of those comments on our social media pages and on our website. So I think I don't see any more scrolling, and my people on the side aren't telling me to say anything else. So I just like to thank all of our participants. Thank you for coming today and being part of this. We're so grateful for your support, and have a happy Wednesday, and go Zags.